Hello, this is International Master Andrew Martin here once again, and on this final DVD in the series we're going to talk a little bit about the endgame. Now, it's a fact that all strong players are excellent at the endgame. It's such an important component of the overall makeup of the strong chess player. The main point about chess is that it should be viewed as a whole. The game should be viewed as an entity. The opening leads naturally to the middle game, and the middle game onto the end game. Quite often decisions that are taken very early in the game affect end game situations. But nevertheless, there are certain rules and aspects of the end game that we should know about, and I'm hoping to increase your technique here by presenting them to you. First of all, let's try and compile a very basic list of the requirements of endgame play. What are the most important things to remember? Alright, well, the very most important thing is that you should play endgames slowly and carefully if you can, whatever the position. Unlike the opening and the middle game, where perhaps you can get away with virtually any move. No, in chess, if you make a mistake, it's not necessary that this mistake costs the whole game. You know, you can often make one or two small mistakes in a game of chess, particularly in the middle game, with most of the pieces on the board, and get away with it. But in the end game, you can't do that. Because there's only a limited amount of material on the board, even one small mistake can cost you the point. So precision is required in the end game, and this is why you have to play slowly. The second important thing to realise is that the king is a very strong piece in the endgame. The king should be used actively and aggressively. Of course, if you start using the king actively when there are a lot of pieces on the board, you're likely to get checkmated. But in the endgame, with only a few pieces left, the king becomes a strong piece, and you have to start using the king aggressively. Thirdly, and this is most important, the main object of any endgame is to create a passed pawn. We've discussed passed pawns and their consequences on other DVDs in this series. But in general, the passed pawn ties the enemy down. The idea is that when he's tied down, you can push this pawn forward to promote the pawn, and in an ideal world, mate follows. Very few endgames tolerate slapdash play or hasty decision making. Now, what I'm going to do for you is to pull out 10 extremely important endgames, which I feel you have to know. In general these days, I believe the endgame should be studied in chunks. Small, bite-sized, easy to understand chunks. In general, we're going to look at some typical positions that are going to come up time and time again in your games. The idea is that you learn how to play these typical positions perfectly, so that when they crop up or something similar occurs in your games, you'll be able to trot out the right technique, just as easily as you would recall the first 10 moves of the Sicilian Dragon, if that's the opening you play. This is the way to study endgames these days, particularly in this era of fast time controls, when you reach an endgame situation and you might be short of time. So this is why it's very important to have some knowledge of endgame theory. But we have to walk before we can run, and so I'm going to deal with basic positions first. Now, the position you see in front of you is the most basic in chess, but it's one of the most important. In this position, if it's white to move, white wins. If it's black to move, it's a draw. The question is, how is it done? Well, we're going to consider how white wins first. I mentioned that the king should be used actively and aggressively, so it's important to move the king up first. The idea in this endgame is that white wins when he gets his king in front of the pawn. And now here is the most important situation where white has gained the opposition. The idea is that black must give way, and then white bypasses him, gaining space and driving the king back. Black probably has to go king e7. Obviously, if black plays king f5 in this situation, then white can simply push the pawn, and after king f6, king d6, the advance of the pawn is not to be denied. So going back to the position after king e7, again white need not touch his pawn and play king e5, and as you can see, black is being systematically driven back to reach the critical position, well, after king e6. Now black must give way, and white can simply push his pawn. He pushes his pawn once again, black gives way, the king goes to f7, and the pawn comes through to queen, after which I know what to do. Follows shortly. Now I'll take you all the way back to the start, king d2, king e7, and show you what happens when white pushes the pawn. This is a move a lot of beginners make in this position, but of course it's a terrible mistake because white can no longer get the king in front of the pawn. In fact, here stalemate is more or less forced, as black brings his king into the centre. White's got his pawn in front of his own king, a situation he does not want, and as long as black remembers to drop back into the centre here, so that when white plays up, black takes the opposition, black should be okay. And in fact this situation is now repeated with black dropping back into the centre, white coming to one side or the other and black opposing him. Remember this situation. Now if white wants to make progress, he has to push his pawn, and we inexorably reach the final and critical position with white having to choose which side he wants to go. Black opposing him. If white wants to make progress, he has to push his pawn. Black goes king e8, and now, well, what is white to do? If he doesn't want to surrender his pawn, he has to go king e6, which is stalemate. So just dropping back to the start one more time, if white wants to win this position, he has to get his king in front of the pawn. It's time to go on now to see what happens when it's black to move in the starting position.